So welcome everybody. Testing, testing, bananas and cheese. You can all hear me? Thumbs up. Yep, awesome. So tonight I'm handing the reins over to Jan Haldane. So I'm going to make her a co-host and also spotlight her for you. So Jan has been a wealth of knowledge over the years when it comes to toxic behavioral recovery, and she has her own personal life experiences, plus, heaps of tales and stories of triumph when it comes to clients and breakthroughs and etc. etc. So Jan, take it away. I will put the PDF inside of the chat, plus any books as well if you would like to purchase them off Jan via Amazon. So Jan, take it away, Dal.
Thanks so much, Trish. All righty. So I've got my notes up here so I don't go off track because I can get lost in stories and interesting things for myself and my clients. So welcome. First of all, welcome everybody. So this topic is something that affects all of your clients and it affects all of us really. So toxic behavioral dynamics, otherwise known as people behaving badly. Now, these dynamics show up in romantic relationships, and that's how I started out about 15 years ago. We're good. About 15 years ago, when I was actually coaching rather than doing hypnosis, and it just ended up happening to me. People were coming to me, mainly women, and it might have been for weight loss back in those days when I was slimmer and fitter and all the rest of it. But they would come along for that. But at the end of the day, underlying that or whatever else they'd come for was something to do with their intimate partner relationship. So I kind of got into this without meaning to get into it. And then so I've done that for many years. I've taught relationship courses to about 3,300 students all around the world to date and ongoing, of course. But more latterly, say the last maybe 2 years, I've really expanded into um, looking at the relationships of families. Because again, that was something that started really coming up with my clients. You know how the universe sends you this stuff, and it's sort of like, okay, right, maybe I'm meant to be doing this. And so then I was getting things about families and mothers that were narcissistic or toxic. I tend to use the word toxic a bit more than narcissistic these days for the reason that we can call someone a narcissist, but actually they're not diagnosed as one. We can't diagnose that. I certainly can't. Some of you on the school might be qualified to do that. Well and good. So I tend to talk to my clients now about uh, narcissistic traits. So if a client comes to me and they're talking about their mother or their sister or their husband or their whatever, oh, that sounds like a narcissistic trait, what you've just told me. And so it sort of saves the thing about putting a label on people. And some people, and again, most of my clients are women, some women are like, my husband's not a narcissist. What are you talking about? And then they sort of start to get defensive and it's not so good. So I'm kind of a little bit more careful what I say these days. But anyway, cracking on. So, so we're tonight looking at romantic relationships, families, and friendships. I've got a book in the pipeline called The Narcissistic Friend. It's another one of these things I've got to get around to editing. And also something that's come up for me maybe in the last year, and that is workplace dynamics, people that have become really traumatized. There's been a huge sort of upsurge in toxic relationships, like toxic workplaces, or relationships in the workplaces, be that with bosses or colleagues or whatever. Maybe that's a thing since COVID. I'm not too sure why that is, but it's certainly come up for me. And so I decided to pursue that as well. All these patterns are interrelated, as we'll talk about. I'm trying to put humongous subject into a nutshell for you tonight. You have got a handout. So I'll do the best I can. I'll ask that you hold your questions until the end. I will try to finish in time to have a Q&A at the end. Okay, so here we go. So we've got those three things: romantic relationships, families, friendships, workplaces. They're different environments, but they're the same underlying patterns. And so the purpose of the session is to help you to recognize toxic patterns quickly. Now, this is important for us, and to understand why they happen. And that might not be the old wives' tales and popular thinking. So, why they happen, and know how to respond without getting pulled in. Now, that's very, very important to us as therapists. Now, I got caught by that last year. I probably haven't got time to tell that tale on this call, but if I see you at AHC, ask me about it. And I'm a very, very experienced therapist. So there we go. Okay, so toxic behavioral dynamics is not taught in school, unfortunately. And from what I can see, it's not taught in most hypnosis courses or coaching courses, unless you're doing a speciality course like I teach. And of course, not just me, there's other people that teach it as well. But in your basic training, let's say, it's generally not taught. So toxic dynamics are not just about difficult people. Now, back in the day, and you can see I've got the white hairs, grey hair, so that was back in the day. They were called difficult people. Goodness me, my mother was extremely difficult, but in the family, she was known as just a difficult person. We didn't have all these fancy names. Narcissism wasn't something we ever thought about. Toxic relationships were not spoken about. So let's have a look. So there's repeating relational patterns that involve control and power imbalance. So control is the big thing. People wanting to control other people. No adult human being wants to be controlled. So that's always going to create a problem. Manipulation, emotional dysregulation, and lack of accountability for behavior and its effect on people. And you see that, I see that a lot, because I do see this a lot. This is mostly what I do these days. And I had a client this week, and I could see all four of those things in there. And she's a pro bono client, someone I know, and I've given her a heap of psychoeducation over the last couple of years, but still, we'll get further into, even though people are aware, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to really want to heal. Well, they want to heal, but they don't want to do the work to heal. I suppose that's probably what it comes to. That there's no actual magic bullet if you're still in one of these types of relationships. Oftentimes the healing comes later. Yes, we can strengthen the ego, but the actual healing comes later. So let's look at some key characteristics here. So one person dominates, the other adapts. So think about, or what I usually use with my clients, is the old-fashioned idea of the endurance marriages. People were married for 50, 60 years. And look, some of those were really happy marriages. And I'm not against that at all. But some of them were not. Some of them were predicated upon the fact that one person gave in all the time. They absolutely abandoned themselves for the sake of the marriage. And back in the day, of course, women were very dependent on men, which they're not now. Hence, there's a lot of shorter marriages. And the example that I normally give, and in fact gave to my client the other day, is that, and this is a true story, of a 75-year-old woman who was at her husband's funeral. They'd been married, say, 55 years, something like that. And at the aftermatch, she said to someone who'd been a friend for a long, long time, this is the first time in my life that I'm actually free. And she was 75 years old. So all of her life, she'd given in anything for the sake of peace. And I've heard people say that, actually say that, just keep the peace, anything. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard that as well. So that's it. So we've got one person dominating the power imbalance, the other one's adapting, always giving in. So everything works as long as, that happens. Otherwise, it doesn't work terribly well. So reality can become distorted by something called gaslighting, which many of you probably heard of, from the 1944 film Gaslight, starring Ingrid Bergman and Charles Boyer. So if you can watch a bit of that, possibly on YouTube. I'm not sure. I saw it as a child. It was really creepy. This guy is trying to make his wife think that she's going mad. I won't be a spoiler if you want to watch it, but yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think Ingrid Bergman won her first Academy Award for that, so it's worth watching. So that's gaslighting, and that's a very prevalent behaviour. So boundaries. Boundaries are ignored or punished. So usually if you try and set a boundary, and this is oftentimes when you see that someone is on sort of the toxic scale, if you want to call it that, is you set a boundary and all of a sudden they just can't handle it. And it might be the most reasonable boundary you could set, but they can't. They just start escalating behavior because they feel like they're out of control. So I'll just give you a very quick example of me in this situation I was talking about last year. This client of mine, and I happened to see her at the cafe in the morning, and she wanted to come around for some reason, just to whinge and moan, basically for nothing. And I said, "Look, I'm doing some recordings," which was true. I said, "No, I've got to have quiet." I started recording, knock, knock, knock on the door. Dog starts barking, bang, 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 and she's yelling out my name. And it's like, there we go. I put in a very innocuous boundary, but no, couldn't respect that. Okay, so emotional safety is absent. So walking on eggshells. People are walking on eggshells, trying to keep the peace, trying to not set this person off, whatever it is, whether they're a rager or someone who won't speak to you for 3 weeks or whatever it is, if you do something they don't like. So the important insight from this really is that toxic dynamics are systemic. They're not random. There's patterns to these. And this is the whole thing, is about really being able to recognize the pattern as early as you can. So they follow predictable cycles. So idealization or calm. So everything's nice in the beginning, everything's romantic of that sort, or it's calm, or it's pally, or it's whatever. Or you're the new person at work and everybody's nice to you. And then all of a sudden there's this tension building. And then there's some sort of incident, and it could be a conflict, it could be a manufactured conflict, some sort of controlling behavior, or abuse. And abuse is an emotional, psychological, and any other sort of abuse that you can possibly think of. And then it's coming around in the cycle, and then it comes to justification or minimization. So justification, you made me do it. You made me angry. You made me do that. Minimization, oh, you're too sensitive. What are you talking about? That means nothing. Or so, you're never going to get a proper communication with someone who's really toxic or high in narcissistic traits. and then it's rinse and repeat. So we go round and round. So then that stops, and we go back to the good part, and then the tension builds, and then basically the shizzle hits the fan, and then justification and blah blah blah, round and round and round and round in circles. I think it's a bit like what Tony Robbins used to call the crazy eight. If anyone's trained with Tony. So let's talk about intimate partner dynamics, which, as I say, is something that I've done for probably 15 years. Um, so it's probably where the toxic patterns are most intense, simply because people can get away with possibly more in that situation, in terms of abuse, as in physical abuse and that sort of thing, than they would in a workplace or possibly in a family. So a common pattern. So it starts off with idealization, which in a intimate partner relationship is also known as love bombing. So this is very common. Now, I hate internet dating. I'm going to tell you that straight up. I absolutely hate it. I think it's extremely dangerous. I've just heard so many stories. I've had bad experiences myself. But you get someone off the internet, you don't really know who they are, and they want to accelerate that relationship so quickly that you don't actually get the opportunity to know or to see who they are. So they put you up on a pedestal, so idealization, love bomb you, bring you flowers, maybe make grand gestures, book a big trip for you or something like that. I mean, there's so many things that they can do, but and then so that goes on for a little while until they think they've got you. And this is what I call the tipping point. So, it could be you move in together. That's a classic one. You get married. I mean, if you're pregnant, um, whatever, when they think they've got you, I've had guys say this to me. I don't know why, but I've had the dubious privilege of having guys actually say to me, well, I thought I'd done enough that she wouldn't leave. Well, what do you mean done enough? Well, I just thought I'd done enough. So they think that they just have to do so much, and then they can take that mask off and go into the devaluation phase when they start dishing out, the verbal abuse and all the gaslighting and all the rest of it. And then, of course, it comes around to the discard, which is either they are discarding um, you, or you've seen the light, or your client have seen the light and you're discarding them. Mostly they've got someone else lined up. That's a huge topic that I could talk about for hours, and I'm being careful not to do that tonight, so I'm going to move on. So intermittent reinforcement. So that is like hot or cold behavior. And I don't know if anyone here has ever been heading home and thinking, oh my God, what's he or she? I mean, this is not male bashing, this is any gender. What are they going to be like tonight? And I can remember doing that when I was married, thinking, oh God, what's he going to be like tonight? You know. So we know that consistency builds trust. Now, when I studied education at university, I mean, we were told that with our classes, be consistent. Be consistent and you'll build the trust, and then you'll have an easier time running your class. And you know that yourself as a parent, that if you're consistent with your children, if you have your rules or whatever they are, and you stick to them, that it works really well. And it's the same when you're training dogs, I might add too. So But intermittent reinforcement is very, very unhealthy, and we'll touch on that a bit as we go through. So the other thing is creating emotional dependency. Now, this is often done by isolation, so that really your world revolves around them, because that's what they actually want, is your world is revolving around them, so they can gaslight you and create their own reality, basically. So again, that's a very unhealthy thing. So looking at the tactics, gaslighting, that never happened. I can remember my husband pushing me round at one stage, and no, that never happened. Well, obviously it did happen, and it happened in front of the children. So yes, it did happen. Projection, blaming the other for their own behaviour. So often they will accuse you of doing exactly what they're doing. And an absolute classic one here is having an affair. You're having an affair. It's generally that they're having the affair. Not all the time, not 100%, but they're just projecting their own behaviour. Now, I'm sure you understand about projecting, but this is a classic behavioural tactic. So isolation in intimate partner relationships, cutting off your support networks, cutting you off from your family, from your friends, often trying to get you to leave your job because they'll support you, whatever. But really what it's all coming down to is it's bringing that your world in like this, it all revolves around them so they can control you. Remember that control is the thing. So control disguised as care. Oh, it's raining tonight. I don't think you should go to hockey practice. All those roads will be slippery. So they don't actually want you playing in the hockey team or whatever it is. It could be anything. But it's disguised as care. Oh, I'm a bit worried, I'm a bit worried it might be slippery on the road or whatever it is. Okay. So you might be asking, after hearing all of this, why do people stay in these relationships? And that's there's a very common thing that people do, not therapists usually, but the general population. Well, why didn't you just leave? Or why didn't he just leave? Why not? Why are they still there? But of course, we know that you can't just leave most of the time, especially if there's children involved or whatever. You can't just leave. And I think the stats are something like, and this is just for women, that a woman will leave something like 7 times and go back before she actually leaves. So reasons why people stay: trauma bonding. So trauma bonding is caused often by this intermittent reinforcement. Uh, they're abused, and then they're all lovey-dovey and all the rest of it. Then they're abused again, and that whole pattern that we were talking about goes around and around and around. And studies have shown that victims often feel more bonded to their abuser than they do to someone who treats them well. And so sometimes you think about, and again, I'll quote about women, why do women like bad boys? It's they get a buzz from that sort of intermittent reinforcement, hot and cold, but it's extremely unhealthy. It's almost like an addiction. So rather than just being in love with their person, they're kind of addicted to them. And then, the Stockholm syndrome, if you don't know it, Google it. I won't go down that road tonight. So trauma bonding, hope for change. Now, every client I've had that's still stuck in a relationship is always hoping that the other person is going to change. Unfortunately, the likelihood is very small because the other person doesn't see that there's anything wrong with them, doesn't want to change, and will only go to therapy, coaching, or any kind of help to try and get the professional on their side, to make the other person feel less worthy than they do already after being probably through years of abuse. They might change and they might not, and they actually won't. But a lot of clients won't really take that on board. Part of it is identity erosion. So my client said to me the other day, "I don't know who I am anymore." Yeah, that's fine. I understand that, and I actually took her through quite a lot of coaching questions with that, even the bomb, the hard one, who would you be without her husband? And so I made her take that away as homework, all these hard questions. I'd given her a hypno session as well, but you know, who are you now? Because he's complaining that he's not the same woman that he married. It's like, yeah, well, you've had 18 years of psychological warfare against you. So, hello. But yeah, it's hard to get through to some people. And of course, there's fear. So, emotional fear of being on your own is a big one for people. I think, that's across all genders. People don't like to be on their own. Um, it's powerful once you get used to it, but I can totally understand that. Of course, financial is huge, and also fear of physical retribution because the 3 months after someone leaves is a very dangerous time if they've been in any sort of DV relationship that actually includes physical abuse. So there's lots and lots of reasons there why people find it very hard to leave. So please, 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 and I'm sure you don't anyway, but never say just leave because it's not that easy. If it was that easy, they probably would have gone. So the key takeaway, I think, from that is it's not about lack of awareness. You can psychoeducate them a lot. But they still can't sometimes, they just can't find it within themselves for some reason to leave. And I might say that religion can come into this hugely. I won't go into that in depth, but those belief systems of the old patriarchal society can be very strong. So remember, it's about conditioning. It's about how people have been conditioned for years and years, probably, of this type of abuse, because that's what it is, and how they attach to people, with that attachment becoming disrupted, of course, if they leave. So let us crack on to family dynamics. So this is where it's all learnt. So family systems are where the patterns are often learned, mostly learned, to be honest. So let's have a look at some of the common roles of children in a dysfunctional family. So the scapegoat, of course, is blamed for everything. The golden child is praised as long as they perform. Then we can have the enabler who can't or won't stand up to the abuser. And then the invisible or silent child who is seen but not heard. And of course, going way, way back, probably to Victorian times, used to be children should be seen but not heard. We know now the results of that, and it's not good. So just as an example for myself, I was an only child. So I was often the scapegoat. I was the golden child if I came first in my class or first in my school. Otherwise, I wasn't. So I had to perform. Luckily, I was reasonably bright, but if I if I lost by 1 point, all hell broke loose. The enabler, so that could be, let's say that the mother is high in narcissistic traits, as my mother was. So my dad was a lovely, lovely man, but he just couldn't stand up to her. I mean, life wasn't worth living. And in fact, he said to me when I left home just before I was 21 to go and live with my boyfriend, what a disgrace that was back then, that he had no reason to live anymore and he died within 3 months. So, some of this stuff is really quite serious, the impact on people. So I wasn't the invisible or silent child, but I've met many people that are, and I'm sure you have too, even if you don't work with relationships per se. So let's look at toxic patterns. So conditional love. So love is transactional. It's based on performance. You're not just loved for being yourself. You've got to perform to make the parent, whichever it is, the mother or the father, and it can be either, um, look good, because it's all about keeping up appearances, because those parents don't see you as an individual person, as an individual child. You're an extension of them. So you're supposed to be making them look good. Emotional invalidation, and I'm sure some of you will might remember this, the old saying, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Now I can remember that, and I can remember almost saying that once to one of my children, and I was like, no, don't say that. But just, yeah, not really devaluing their emotions, basically. So parentification, when the child has to emotionally be the adult. So that could happen in all sorts of scenarios. It could be perhaps a parent or mother, let's just say, who drinks or has compromised mental health. The child comes home from school, they're passed out or they're in the bedroom, they've never got up, and the child has to actually be the adult and maybe, cook the dinner, run the house, whatever. That happens to a lot of children. Adultification, treating a child as if they've got more maturity than they have at that point in their development. An example of that could be treating a child as a confidant and, telling them all sorts of things that really are beyond their age range and they shouldn't be hearing about the other parent or siblings or whatever it is. Now, adultification also in the States has to do with racism, but originally the meaning was to do with treating a child as if they're more mature than what they are. Chronic criticism or comparison, so pitting siblings against each other. And I'm sure many of you have seen that over the years in your own families or heard about it from your clients. So the long-term impact of that, of course, is low self-worth, people-pleasing, chronic people-pleasing. Now, women of my age and probably a bit younger were that's what were told to, we were basically conditioned to be people pleasers. That's what it came down to. You were supposed to be a people pleaser. Everyone else came first. Anything about yourself was selfish. That's changed a lot now. A lot of things have changed. But yeah, people pleasing is one of those things. Difficulty with boundaries. Again, difficulty with setting a boundary out of fear. Now, I had a client couple of weeks ago, and she came to me because her mother is, well, she told me her mother was narcissistic, so I just went along with it. But certainly the behaviours she was describing were absolutely dreadful. Now, this woman was about 50, very competent person, but the way the mother treated her like a child, so she was infantilizing the my client. And we were working on setting some boundaries. And my poor client was terrified of what would happen if she set a boundary. And it was something I can't even remember off the top of my head what it was. Like, say, don't call me at work. Let's just say it was said. Don't call me between 8:30 and 5:30 because I'm at work, I'm on the road, I can't be taking calls. And she was just having heart palpitations at the thought of trying to do this with her mother. So I'm actually running a workshop on the 18th of June online. It's called Better Boundaries, and it's about helping your clients set boundaries. And of course, we need to set our own boundaries. And it comes with a journal type thing about boundaries. It's not it hasn't got my branding or anything on it, just to help clients to set boundaries, because that really just made me think, whoa, okay, this stuff is really serious. And that mother was not a nice person, but she set a boundary. She stuck to it. I said, you can't waver. You can't waver. If you set that boundary, you can't waver. And it was something she really, really didn't want to do. And she set the boundary, she held it, and she didn't do it. And I was so proud of her. So that was awesome. I was pleased. So now the other thing is attraction to toxic partners. And there's all sorts of theories about this and the spiritual beliefs, and some of them are actually quite toxic in themselves. But what it comes down to is that your subconscious mind is trying to fix the problems of the past. So this toxic partners will subconsciously remind you about something possibly in your childhood. And so it's trying to work through those, but unfortunately, most of the time that's not successful. And I won't go deeply into that here because it's a big topic. So, key insight, clients are often not just reacting to current situations, they're replaying early relational templates. So, for this client I'm talking about with the mum who is so, we'll just say, difficult, this has been going on forever and a day, and she's got a sibling that this played off, and, the scapegoat, the golden child, and then they all reverse. And so being the golden child as well in these situations is not actually as good as what it sounds, because that's only conditional on your performance. So again, a big, big subject. So workplace dynamics. So toxic dynamics don't stop at home. They scale into organisations, unfortunately. And I guess many of you, and certainly me, I can think back to when I was in the workforce, and, some pretty toxic situations at work. We weren't so up with the play a few years ago, but now people recognise what's happening, and it's just becoming more and more prevalent. I guess our world is different to what it used to be, and that's showing up in the workplace. It's an interesting field to actually get into, and I think it could make just quite a good niche by itself if you could team up with an employment lawyer or someone like that, which is something that I'm planning to do. Okay, so common workplace patterns. So narcissistic leadership. So I've written a book called The Narcissistic Boss. Uh, and so what happens there when you've got narcissistic type people? They wear a mask to impress the superiors. So, they look wonderful to the superiors while they're abusing their underlings. So it's a very tricky thing, because they look great to management, let's say, but they're absolute rubbish, or worse than rubbish, abusers to people who are under them. And of course, you don't want to be one of those people. So bullying is often disguised as performance management. Micromanaging is huge. Every nitpicking, every little thing, until people who are quite competent when they come into that particular workplace lose their confidence because they've got someone who may not be as good as they are. And of course, that could be the whole problem. Picking at them all the time, and they can't really do anything. And often their ideas get stolen by this person and put over as their ideas. And yeah, there's a long list of things that can happen. And it has a very negative effect because, of course, in the workplace, I mean, that's where you make your living. So, that's got very wide connotations. Again, it's not one of these things where you can necessarily just leave. You can start making an exit plan, just like you can from a romantic relationship, but you often can't just leave. So, micromanaging, yeah, that sort of thing used to drive me nuts. Gaslighting at an organizational level, so giving people the wrong information, um, not inviting them to a meeting or something, and then saying, "Oh, well, you were invited," or just telling them a whole lot of BS, quite honestly, to make them doubt themselves, and that does happen a lot. Scapegoating employees, so everything becomes the fault of one particular person. And often these bosses, managers, superiors, whatever they are, they can then, of course, get their flying monkeys, which is a term that comes from The Wizard of Oz, the movie The Wizard of Oz. All these people that they recruit to actually bully and scapegoat this person. So it's a horrible, horrible dynamic. And it's called workplace mobbing, is the term for it. So, signs of a toxic workplace, if you've got a client talking to you about work, um, and how it's affecting them. So, of course, high turnover is fairly obvious. So, what can happen is you can get somebody there in possibly a middle management kind of role, and people just can't work with them. So, they keep turning over and turning over. There's a huge churn, but they still appear to be so wonderful to these superiors because they're pathological liars, so they tell any sort of old rubbish to their superiors, and so everyone else is attrition. A fear-based culture, again, it's the same sort of thing. Scared that they're going to be performanced out or fired, or just life is going to be made hell, so that they really, really want to resign, and that happens quite often too. Most of these types of people in leadership roles, of course, are not leaders, not in the sense of being true leaders. They take no accountability. Everything is shoved onto somebody else. It's somebody else's fault. Again, the scapegoat and blame shifting. Same. Blamed for everything. And I'm sure that some of this is, you're thinking back to places you might have worked. Oh, yes, right. I remember that person. So the impact on individuals is that burnout, of course. Um, People are trying to perform. And so often, we get the awful things where, the boss thinks that they can send you an email at midnight and you're supposed to answer it straight away. There's all these ridiculous behaviours. So people burn out, they're anxious all the time. They lose confidence in themselves, even though they might be extremely competent people. And of course, become emotionally exhausted just and find it absolutely hard to cope. So, a key insight from that is that the workplace often mirrors family dynamics and authority figures replicate parental roles. So, many of you, I'm sure, do inner child work as part of your work with clients. That's something to remember. So, just I'll start winding this up now so that we can have a Q&A. So, the big picture, as we can see from all of that, these are not separate issues. It's expressions of the same underlying dynamics, which is basically dysregulated individuals creating dysregulated systems. What helps? Awareness, so recognizing the patterns, boundaries that are clear and consistent, emotional detachment. So, say you're in the workplace, just really detaching emotionally. So, not disengaging. We don't want numb people or dissociated people, but being able to detach emotionally and rebuilding identity and autonomy. And that's really the whole way through, um, who are you now after you've been through all of this? Because you're not going to be the same person you were before any of this started. And I've heard that from people talking to me about their workplaces. They might have been there, I don't know, 5 years or something, and they just don't feel like the same people anymore. And I said, well, because you're not. You've been through this trauma, that does something to you. So you're not, but we can look at who your future self is going to be. So we can future pace them with that sort of thing. So you you can't change a toxic system by just trying harder. It actually doesn't work. You really need to change your relationship to that toxic system in some way, shape, or form. So it's learning how to navigate it really, which might include leaving or it might not, depending on circumstances. So yeah, it's such a broad subject, and I'm just trying to cram it in. But I hope with the handout that it's enough information there to be helpful to you. So I'm going to finish that there and see if anybody has any questions for me. Anybody want to ask anything?
Do the monkeys ever get like smart again, or I don't even know what I'm trying to say. It's as if they've worshipped someone and then all of a sudden they go, oh shit, their role. Do they like flip sides on all that sort of crap, or do they just ne look for the next thing that's, going to give them that hit that I'm worshipping someone?
It depends on why they're being a monkey. So when we're talking about the monkeys here, we're talking about the flying monkeys.
Mm.
So the people that are siding with someone who's behaving badly, and they do it for different reasons. Some of them are just, thank you, Sue. Some of them are just hangers on, if you know what I mean. Some of them like drama, so they actually thrive on being in a dramatic situation. So it's a possibility, Trish, that that they might see things one day, but yeah, it's hard to know.
You've actually light bulbed something for me. I remember years ago, I had this group of friends, and there was Jebra and Raquel, and they were like a power couple, these two. But oh my God, they thrived off hurting and hating on each other. And they would deliberately cause drama for each other in the relationship because it's as if that's what made the relationship thrive. So, yeah, I think you've just light bulbed some stuff for me. Thank you.
That's okay, yeah, and so that's another point that I want to raise, and often, this goes down like a cup of cold soup, quite frankly, with some people that I say it. I'll come to the monkeys again in a minute. That there are a lot of people out there who actually enjoy hurting people, and that's the reality. Now, some people can't face that, but it is the reality. There's more people than what you'd think who actually get off on drama and hurting people. Um, yeah, so
And that might answer Felicity's question, where she's asked, would you say monkeys like the attention seeking and feeding the drama? US Senate flying monkeys love it.
yes, yes, some of them do they like the drama, and for a while they're in the in circle, you know, they're part of it. They're in the inner sanctum, but the thing is that that's got an expiry date on it. A monkey's only useful for as long as they're useful. Again, it's a transactional relationship. It's about performance. So they're being used, um, and they can't see that. So I don't know whether that answers the question, but yeah, yeah, they just
Yeah.
they don't see it, or they don't choose to see it. Yeah. Is that it, Felicity? Is that what you wanted to know? You can unmute if you want and ask me. No, can't hear you, darling.
She's also asked,
Yay. Woo.
oh, she's worked it out.
Yeah.
I'm on my phone. It's terrible. I've almost put my finger through it trying to just get to the chat. Um, yeah, no, I thought that was that. My other thing is the next question that I more so for couples where one of them will start using sex as the weapon,
Mm.
like that's the manipulation tool.
Yep, sex is often weaponized. Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Is that
It's
the person weaponizing that more the toxic person, obviously? Or could they also be using that as a defense mechanism from a toxic person?
well, possibly either or, without knowing circumstances of what's going on, which you don't
Mm-hmm.
always know anyway, when it comes to sexual relationships, unless you specialize in that. Yeah, sometimes people high, well, men high in narcissistic traits often start off wanting sex very quickly. They rush into a sexual relationship, and everything's fine and dandy. And then when the tipping point comes, when they think that they've got to, then they just don't try, or worse than that, they want to do things that you don't enjoy. And because I've obviously had more female clients than men that have told me this, so I'm sure that guys can have problems with women. So it can kind of swing either way. You don't know. Let's face it. If someone is abusing you, are you going to want to have sex with them?
No.
Probably not. No.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
what I thought. It could work both ways.
Yeah. Yeah. So if someone is verbally abusing you and making rude comments about your body and all the rest of it, and God knows what they're saying, is that going to make you feel like it? No, probably not.
That's when you say naughty boys don't get lollies.
Absolutely, absolutely. But some of them will take it, will get quite upset about that, and there could be all sorts of repercussions. I mean, that's the other thing. Sometimes you just lie back and think of England and just tolerate it. That's another thing that happens in these relationships a lot. Yeah.
That
Mm.
happens a lot with like I know a lot of Italians and Maltese and European kind of women have had that a lot too, and it can also be a lot of religious based that too, where you just lay there and take it.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm,
that's exactly what it was like. And back in the day, it was women were just supposed to basically do that and accommodate the man whenever he wanted it. Things have obviously changed, but some belief systems haven't.
yeah,
So yeah, so hopefully that's been a help, Felicity.
yeah. Thanks.
Um, so yeah, I see Argie's put here. I've seen it in aged care situations, retirement villages. Absolutely, yeah, yeah. It's very interesting because where I live in a small town in New Zealand near Tauranga, if anyone knows where that is. Um, and this it's a grey demographic basically. Um, yeah, and oh gosh, I see some of these couples, and I'm like, oh my goodness, a lot of it is the endurance thing because you can't afford to split up with your partner because you'd never be able to afford a house. So yeah,
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 and
I
have you
hear.
seen the trend that goes around on social media like TikTok and stuff? It's called trad wife. So
Oh yes,
yeah, become the traditional wife. And yeah, where you're perfect, you worship your husband and the food and how you dress. Yes. So it's actually a trend as well that people are following.
I mean, I just think it's yeah, I find it very it does make me laugh because that's what we were trying to get away from all those years ago was that, and now it's coming around that young women are actually wanting to do that. It's it's not healthy. A lot of that I think too also has a religious kind of background of beliefs to it. Yeah, but that's just setting yourself up for being abused, basically. Yeah, it's unfortunately. So anybody else got any? How are we going? We're just about there. Just checking the comments. Oh, yeah, Huggy saying I had a boss like that. Yeah, I've had a few bosses that were. Yeah, yeah. I think I'd be unemployable too, Trish. Actually, but I mean, I'm semi-retired anyway. But I think, yeah, I can't be bothered with people's BS. I really
Honestly,
can't.
someone's going to punch me in the mouth one day because I'll just be like, ooh, somebody forgot their manners today. And they're like, oh, you're being condescending. And I'm like, you're being rude. What's the difference? Like, smart ass. So yeah, but thank you so much, Jen, for this talk. I know I've learnt stuff, and I'm sure everybody here has learnt a lot of stuff. So please jump onto that event. I will throw that link inside the replay for everybody tomorrow. It's only like 19 New Zealand dollars. It's like 15 bucks Australian. You spend more than that on bloody Subway sandwich. So, so jump in on that. I will send out the replay tomorrow with all the information inside of it as well. And I'm going to throw Jan into the deep end. You can reach out to her. Seriously, if you've got a
Yeah,
question, she will answer it. She's been a wealth of support to me recently, and I cannot recommend what she does enough, honestly. Okay? So thank you everybody for joining in, and I will send out those replays tomorrow. Okay?
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
See ya.
Thanks, Jane.
Big love. Big love.
Thank you. Good night,
Big
all.
love.
See ya.
Bye.